Welcome to the LongCovidPodcast with me, Jackie Baxter. I am really excited to bring you today's episode. Please do check out the links in the show notes where you can find the podcast website, social media and support group, as well as a link to buy me a coffee if you are able. You should not rely on any medical information contained in this podcast and related materials in making medical, health-related or other decisions. Please do consult a doctor or other health professional. I love to hear from you. If you've got any suggestions or feedback or just want to say hey, then please do get in touch. I really hope you enjoy this episode, so here we go. Hello and welcome to this episode of the Long COVID podcast. I am delighted to welcome my guest today, Michael Towers, otherwise known as the chronic fatigue superhero. So I'm really excited to talk today because I've never met a superhero before. So a very, very warm welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Jackie.
So to start with, would you mind just introducing yourself a little?
Yeah, so I'm Michael Towers. I'm the creator of a comic book called Chronic Fatigue Superhero, which is also an Instagram page where I share comics and advocacy articles relating to post-viral conditions, fatigue conditions. And yeah, I basically had a post-viral condition for probably about 20 years on and off from varying extremes. And so, yeah, now I just spend my time kind of raising advocacy for it, but also creating these comics just to sort of bring light into the lives of people who are struggling with that as well.
Yeah, I mean, it was this kind of idea of, I was going to say making a joke. I'm not sure that's quite the right word, but making light of things and trying to see the best in a situation that isn't necessarily the one you would have chosen, that I really liked.
Yeah.
So yeah, I would love to hear a little bit more about kind of what led you to do the book.
So I think probably like at the very beginning, like of all of that, I think, from my childhood, I had always used, I think, comedy and imagination to deal with things that I found difficult. So I think, whenever I was struggling, I kind of always went into my own head and I would create scenarios and I would sort of live in my imagination a little bit. And I was always, the sort of funny one at school, but it was really just, I guess, my way of dealing with situations was that, if something horrible was happening, that you either kind of laughed or cried, and I wanted to choose to laugh. And crying's healthy too, that has its place as well. But I think for me, it was a huge thing growing up, going through a lot of difficulties to be able to look at them and laugh at them and see them in a different way. And, when you get so stressed out and so upset by things, to be able to step back and go, I can actually use this, especially as a writer, because, they say like comedy is tragedy, it's like, you watch any sitcom and it always ends in tragedy. There's never like the happy ending, at the end of the episode. Everything kind of falls apart, and that's what's funny. And so I think there's such a truth to that sometimes the best comedy can come from the darkest places. And I think that's what I used. I used a lot of my darkest places to create some of my funniest things, because when something did stress me out just too much, it became like, okay, let's step back and let's look at this, because this can actually be weirdly a bit of a gold mine here. Like this is a gold, like it's like when you tell a story that was horrendous at the time, but it sounds funny when you tell it in hindsight. You're like, well, this was horrible, but this is actually a pretty funny story to tell. And a lot of funny stories are like that. They're like these ridiculous, awful things that happen, but now you can kind of look back and go, how ridiculous was this, And I think that was the mindset behind Chronic Fatigue Superhero was, I created it on a really particularly difficult day for me, where it was really the first day I had ever experienced being completely bedridden and unable to to sit up. And that was a scary day for me. And I went through a lot of emotions that day. But in the afternoon, as it sort of calmed down, it was that situation of like, what can I do with this? You know? And I don't really know where the idea itself came from. It just kind of popped into my head that it would be really funny to have, a comic character that was a superhero that wanted to help and wanted to take care of everyone and like be a superhero a bit. But by the time he got there to the rescue, he was tired from like traveling there. So it's like he had good intentions, and I feel like that's so much of like long COVID and chronic fatigue syndrome community is they're often people that are really giving and empathic and want to help people, but they can't. So I feel like it spoke to that in a humorous way.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I think I'm the same. I've always been the person that's like, oh my goodness, this is awful. Let's make a really inappropriate joke about it because that's how I deal with this.
Yeah, yeah.
And definitely it's not for everyone.
Yeah, no.
But you get the same in. I'm thinking about professions that see really horrendous things. You hear about it in like sort of in the police force and sort of medical professions, don't you? And this kind of like gallows humor.
Yeah, yeah.
That actually is really very, very funny, but it's also very dark at times.
Yeah. I think it's interesting. Like, when I created it, the one thing that I was worried the most about was, are people going to appreciate this or are people going to be mad about this? Because it's a very serious and horrible thing to go through. And I knew because I was literally completely bedridden while creating this thing. And I thought, oh, I could put this out there and just have torrents of abuse. Like, how dare you make fun of the condition and all that. But I think that when you go through something, you kind of understand it. And I think that when people saw it, they recognize it's done with a great sensitivity as well. It's not like a mockery. It's not making fun of it. It's kind of almost an in joke that only we can get. It's this in joke that if you're healthy and you read it, you might get some of it, but you won't get all of it. So it's a bit of an in joke, really, where we can just sort of look at it and laugh about some of the more difficult things together. And I think that's why I never really had that negative backlash, because I think everybody understood that I was coming from a place of like care and sensitivity and someone who has experienced this to the very extreme, and not someone looking at a condition from the outside and going, how silly is this? So I think that people appreciated that I knew what I was talking about, that I was, part of a community and someone who'd experienced it so much, and just wanted to be able to sort of make something for those people and for people like me.
Yeah, you're right. And it comes back to that thing where nobody gets it except us. And it's, I guess, part of that kind of in joke, isn't it? And it's something that I've realized in the sort of relatively recent past, since getting COVID and long COVID. And, before I got ill, I had a few people that had chronic conditions of some description. And I sort of assumed that I understood, because why wouldn't I understand? And then since getting ill myself, it's like, oh, okay, no, I didn't understand at all. And how could I have? In some ways, it's very difficult to describe it to someone else. And everybody's so different. Everybody's symptoms are on the kind of spectrum, aren't they? And we move up and down that spectrum on different days. But for somebody else to kind of understand something that they haven't actually experienced is very, very difficult. And I guess it's the same with the book, isn't it? Somebody who was completely healthy and reading it probably wouldn't get as much from it as somebody who had experienced it. And I quite like that, because it's kind of special. It's like, oh, it's something for us that they don't have.
Yeah, it's funny because I was thinking before when I was talking that the reactions that I get from healthy people are so different from people who have the condition, that if I show friends, they'll often look at it and feel like it's a bit sad. They'll be like, oh, like they'll read something and go, oh, like, and I'm like, no, 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 that's funny. Like, But so I think it's something that, yeah, if you've experienced it, you can look at it and you get it and you feel like I relate to that so much that that actually is funny. And I think people who haven't gone through it are like looking at it and going, oh my gosh, this is like horrendous. But it's like, well, this is just our everyday. So we can kind of look at it and laugh. And yeah, so I do get those two different reactions. I think that a lot of people don't. If you're well, you might not appreciate the humor behind it as much. I think people probably get half the book if they're well, and the other half they're a bit confused by. So it is nice to kind of create something for people who really get it.
Yeah, definitely. When I was reading the book, it was basically kind of just nodding the whole way through. And it's that kind of solidarity almost of like, yeah, this is someone who gets this on a level that my partner who's sitting next to me while I was reading it, for example, just kind of he could from having watched me, so he probably had more understanding than your sort of average person on the street. But he still didn't find it as funny as I did.
And you probably felt bad to laugh about some of it too.
Do you think there's an element of that? People who haven't experienced, so don't kind of understand the sort of the in humor of it. Do you think they might sort of feel guilty about that?
Yeah, I think maybe like because like I said, I show it to some people who are healthy and they kind of they go, oh, like I don't know, I think maybe they feel bad to laugh at it, but it's one of those things where there's certain things that you can say in life if you're a part of a group that like I will say things about myself being disabled because I can say that about myself, but because I laugh about even the things that I struggle with, I laugh about. But if someone healthy said that sort of thing to me, they would feel horrendous and they would think they were being like horrendously ableist. But it's like you can kind of say it about yourself if you're joking around. So I think there's a bit of that too, where maybe they don't want to laugh at those jokes because they don't want to feel like they're laughing at me. But to me, it's like I wrote them and I guess it's easy for me because I'm in the situation to make light of it, whereas they maybe don't feel as comfortable to make light of it as I do.
Yeah, that's a really good point, actually. It's like when you're sort of within the community,
Yeah,
the sort of, the experiencing it yourself, it's almost like it's more okay.
yeah.
So the process of writing it, I mean, you kind of touched on it earlier, and I'm amazed every day by the things that people who are really, really very sick can achieve. People who are working in advocacy, or people who are researching, or people who are writing books, all of these things that these people are doing despite being incredibly unwell, and with the sort of fluctuating health as well that seems to be quite common. So you managed to draw, write, and publish a book while being extremely unwell. Like, that's amazing.
Yeah. It was a very, very long and very exhausting process. And it was a process of just me proving to myself that I could still do something while in this state. So when I first started drawing them, as I said, the first day I was completely bedridden and would be for at least a year, where I was at a severe stage where I couldn't feed myself, walk, talk, sit up in bed. This was for basically the whole first year that I was doing these comics. There was actually a point of 8 months for that year where I couldn't actually draw them. There was an 8 month gap between number 8 and 9 because for 8 months I couldn't lift my hand. Um, when I started them, I was too weak to color them in. So I would literally just draw with the pencil and then I would hand them to my wife and she would color them for me. So it was just literally draw the dude, draw the speech bubble, and then just collapse in a heap. I couldn't move. She would do the coloring and then she would upload it to Instagram for me. And we basically, I got about 8 in before I lost like all my ability for about 8 months to do anything, to feed myself or move. I lost that for 8 months. Then when I came a little bit out of that sort of dark period, I thought, I kind of looked at it again. I only had 8 comics and I thought, let's do it. Let's keep going. So I started again and we continued to do that where I would draw and she would color. And then eventually I had like 52 and I thought, oh, geez, this could be a book. and I realized I'd have to redo them digitally to make them a book. So I had to trace over the old ones on my tablet and start again. And we just did that again, where I would trace around the old one and she would color it in. And sometimes I would do a bit of coloring too. And but it was just this process of like, just not stopping. There were times where I had to take months off. There was that 8 month period. There was another 6 month period. There was a few 3 month periods where I didn't draw. There were so many periods where I had to stop it. And I think that's why for me it became such a mission of proving to myself that even when you can't do something, sometimes you still can. Like I was always a writer. And when this happened to me, when I lost my ability to even move for 8 months, it was really hard because writing has always been the thing that I've relied on to cope. And when I lost that ability, it was like, okay, I can't write anymore. And there were times where I literally couldn't write, but there are also times where maybe I could draw for 5 minutes and maybe that's enough, And I think sometimes if you can't do something the way you want to do it, it can put you off from doing it at all. And so for me, it was like, I don't care if this book takes 5 years, which it did. I'm just going to do my 5 minutes when I can. And at the end of that, however long that time is, I will have something. And that's what it was. That's what I came up with at the end of 5 years, was that I actually did have something and enough to put out. And it was a testament to me and to everybody who has lost their ability to do something, that even if we can't do something in the way that we used to or that we want to, that many times there's still a way to do it, as long as we kind of let go of that time frame, let go of time and allow ourselves to just do what we can.
We'll be right back. I'm interrupting myself for a second to tell you about long COVID breathing. The fabulous Vicky Jones and I have teamed up to bring you long COVID breathing. We are both passionate about sharing our expertise and experience of the breath and how incredibly helpful that can be with long COVID. We've worked together to develop a course that is specifically tailored to those with long COVID. It's a 6-week course with 12 sessions, all delivered online. The community feel and learning that we're all sharing is such a joy. To find out more information and to sign up for our courses, workshops and other shorter sessions, please check out the link below, longcovidbreathing.com, or email longcovidbreathing@gmail.com to start your breathing journey with us. Yeah, I mean, that's incredible. I mean, I've noticed myself to some degree that a lot of the pressure and the expectation is actually, it's our own pressure and our own expectation, because that's what we used to do. So, I want to go for a walk. I can't do the walk that I could do before, therefore I'm not going to do anything at all.
Yeah.
Doing a little bit's rubbish. It's not good enough.
Yeah.
And I don't know, why do we do this to ourselves? And it took me quite a long time to kind of realize that actually, well, getting outside at all is actually amazing. And, maybe I can't walk the same distance I could before. Obviously I can't. But, being able to do just a little bit is awesome, and to really value that. And it sounds a little bit like what you've just kind of described with, making this a thing that you're going to do. And it sort of doesn't matter how long it takes and how many 5 minutes, you need to piece together. You just keep doing that kind of, 5 minutes, 5 minutes, 5 minutes. And it really does show, doesn't it, that eventually all of those 5 minutes and all those little dudes that you've drawn, they have become this book that you have managed to do, which is amazing.
And, in my condition, I never would have thought, if someone asked me, like, could you make a book? Well, my answer is no, of course I can't make a book. Like, that's ridiculous. And it's like anything. It's like, we all learn very well how to pace over our time with this condition. We learn over the years how to pace well and how to sort of, break activities up into manageable pieces. And I think it was just that same thing of like, it is frustrating when, if I go sit by the beach or something one day, and I remember doing a 4-hour walk along the beach years ago. And I just think, oh my gosh, like I can't even wrap my head around it. I can't even wrap my head around walking to like where I can see, let alone 4 hours. So it's like, you think, like in general, I would say I can't really walk, because I can't do it much. But it's like, oh, I can do a minute or two, and that minute or two is important. So I value those minute or twos I can walk, or minute or twos I can sit up, or minute or twos that I can do a drawing, and in the end they do add up.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Those couple of minutes just give you so much joy as well, I think, don't they? Which is so important.
Yeah.
I loved what you were saying about how it's almost been a bit of a collaboration between yourself and your wife as well. Is that quite a special thing as well for the sort of the two of you to have worked together a bit?
It's pretty good, like to be able to have that, because you know it's like, I guess I wrote it and drew it, but it's nice to be able to say, well, I couldn't have done it without this person as well. It's like people go, oh, you made this. I guess I did, like I wrote and drew it, but it's like I also know that I couldn't have done it without someone. And I think I always say this, when people talk about, the importance of being independent. And I think it's very important to be independent in many things in life. But I also think it is so important as well to have someone, no matter what you're going through, and not even just a partner, but a best friend or someone in your life. And I think connection is incredibly important, especially in this condition. It isolates us so much. And so to be able to have something to connect with someone on and work on with someone, and knowing that this person, you couldn't have done it without them. And I say that all the time. It's like, yeah, it's kind of my thing in a way that I created it and did it. But in another way, it would be nowhere without this person, because I would have drawn a stick figure and probably never done it again. But because she colored it and was able to free up that energy for me, and my energy could just go to that creative side and just thinking of laying in bed, just thinking of jokes and thinking of like, okay, what's this symptom? Okay, how can that be funny? Or what's the situation? Okay, how can that be funny? And that freed up the energy for me to be able to do it. So I think that was such an important thing to have. And I think if it was in that position having to do the coloring, I don't know if I would have finished it. And even now, as I've gotten into the journey, I just wanted to add that now that I've published the first book and I'm still doing new comics as well, is that even like my followers and supporters and friends are now inspiring and helping out, in that way too. Like that community is inspiring me to want to, do more and create more, and that's sort of helping too. So in that way, it's collaborative as well. That I couldn't have done it without the community support and the community like offering me friendship and inspiring me to keep going as well.
Yeah, and that's fantastic, isn't it? And it really shows the power of support that I just wasn't really aware of before, and you obviously have wonderful support in your wife, and my partner's been amazing. And I think, how would I have coped without him? And I would have really struggled.
Mm.
And there are people out there, hundreds, thousands of people out there who don't have somebody like that. And it kind of reminds you how much more difficult things could be, I guess. But not just support from someone who's very close to you. I mean, you just mentioned the sort of the wider community and people who follow you and people who comment and say, this cartoon is wonderful, and you just made me laugh, and thank you for cheering me up, I was having a terrible day. Those sort of comments. And they can be incredibly inspiring, can't they? Especially, I guess,
Mm.
when you're putting all of your energy. And I think when you say all of your energy, I think people with a condition like this really understand what that means, I think.
Yeah, like when I make a post about advocacy, or just sharing my thoughts on something, it's like that takes a second to post, but it took weeks to write it and to think it and to put it down. And but it's so true. It's like the people that the friends and the people that support it, it wouldn't exist without them either. As I said, I was so worried when I first put one out that it could have been met with an angry response, and it just wasn't, by anybody, by not a single person messaged me to be like, so everyone got it and everyone supported it. And since then, it's just like there's been just some beautiful friendships and support, and people who are always commenting and always sharing and always liking, and always see those people that are, commenting and supporting, and it wouldn't be possible without them either. So I think that's a really beautiful element of it as well.
Yeah, definitely. And, yeah, connecting. We were talking briefly just before we started recording about, meeting different people in different countries and different time zones and things. And, you mentioned how isolating a condition such as this can be. And you're right, it really, really can. But I think it's also, for me, it's kind of opened my eyes to a whole kind of community and a whole way of connecting
Mm.
with different people from different walks of life and everything that actually I wasn't really aware of before. So I think maybe that's a very small silver lining
Yeah,
to the whole thing.
there's definitely, a few silver linings that you can find. I mean, before, when we were talking about whether, healthy people would understand, and I always say that I am the first person to admit that I would not have understood this condition. Um, I would have been, sympathetic about it and all that sort of stuff, but I would not have understood it. Deep down, I would not have understood it. I wouldn't have understood its range or its complexity. I couldn't have comprehended it. So I think like that's one good thing that I've gotten from it as well is an understanding of some complex issues, and not just from my own condition, but from a wide community. There are conditions I didn't know about before. There are things that I understand so much better now. Um, it opens you up to a world of different viewpoints. When you have thousands of followers and thousands of different people with thousand different life experiences coming from different places, you see so much and hear so much that you wouldn't in your everyday life, where you just have, you might just have your coworkers and that's your whole circle, or the people you went to school with and that's your whole circle. And all of a sudden you have thousands of people from all over the world with different belief systems, backgrounds, religions, conditions, thought, processes. And it is actually quite a blessing to kind of grow. You grow a lot with these conditions when you experience them, because you meet so many different people and you meet some really incredible people, complex people, very intelligent people, very creative people. So it is quite a blessing that I think the range of people that I know now and that I communicate with now is so much more, nourishing to me, I think, than just having those same, similar people in my life.
Yeah, I would actually completely agree with that. There have been plenty of people who I have lost touch with,
Mm.
but there are a lot of people that I have gained. People who I wouldn't have probably met otherwise. And I like to think that I was an empathetic person before,
Yeah,
but I feel like I've kind of gained a whole extra level of kind of understanding and hopefully empathy for something that I, yeah, didn't really understand before, which I think is a good thing. I hope it's a good thing anyway.
yeah, yeah,
I mean, I love the character of the superhero, and I think in some ways, everyone dealing with a chronic condition, whatever it is, and whatever the severity, or I think anybody dealing with that is a superhero on some level. And I think they probably don't feel like that. I mean, I feel kind of useless when I can't do things. And I think that's probably something that a lot of people do. It's like, oh, I can't do the things I could do before. I maybe can't work, or I can't work in the same way, and I can't socialize in the same
yeah,
way. And, you start to see yourself through this different lens, don't you? Where like you're broken and you don't work and you can't do things. And it's so much all about the I can't. And the I can't is exhausting in itself. And I think actually I'm very good at saying this to other people and very, very, very bad at saying it to myself. But actually, we are all superheroes and we
yeah.
are all amazing just to be dealing with this.
I think that what a lot of people, including myself, including all of us, I think the things that make people feel that they're not worthy are the exact reasons why they are superheroes, and why they are, like it's not even being strong if your life's perfect. You never have to be. And it's when your life's not perfect that you have to be stronger, when you have to put in extra effort, and when you do struggle, there are days where you get through and it's just getting through a day. It's just getting through a minute at a time. And I think, when you can't work and can't do things, it makes you feel like, okay, am I useless? Am I weak? Am I not good enough? And it's those things that are what makes you good enough. And the reason that you're strong is because you are struggling and you're still there and you're still doing it. And so, I always say about the superhero, because people always said, when I started, they were like, "Oh, is this based on you?" And I always said, "Well, it was never meant to be." Um, I guess it kind of looks like a cartoon version of me, but it was literally just like I just sat down and drew a dude. I was kind of just making a joke on Superman, but with like a C on his chest instead. So it was kind of just like a Superman looking character. It wasn't specifically supposed to be me. So I've always said the chronic fatigue superhero is not me, it's all of us. And it looks like that because I was kind of just trying to do a cheesy Superman type of superhero character. But at the end of the day, it's everybody. It has to look like something, but it is everyone. And that's because, and as I said, I've always related that to the chronic illness community. Is just these people, like, you see it all the time in your inbox of people messaging you going, are you okay? And I hope you're okay. And that they're so sick themselves, and you're like, this is exactly what I'm writing about, is these people that are so unwell but they just want to help. And that's what the chronic fatigue superhero is. It's just someone that, no matter how unwell he is, he just wants to help. And I just think that represents everybody in this community.
Yeah, definitely. And again, that's, bringing people together, isn't it? Into that kind of, I don't know if identity is the right word, but, this kind of, identity of the superhero. When we were talking about isolation earlier, that's quite a nice idea, isn't it? The sort of bringing together and combating that kind of isolation. Um,
Yeah.
yeah. Um, do you have a favorite cartoon?
Um, that's difficult. Um,
Sorry.
it changes when I'm looking at them. It's like sometimes my favorite song is just the one that I'm listening to and go, oh, this is my favorite. And then the next day I'm like, no, this is. Um, so I think I kind of have two that I always say are my favorites. One is my favorite, like in a funny, like one to me is the one that makes me laugh the most, and one to me is the one that I think is just really sweet. So it's my favorite. So the one that makes me laugh the most is the guy who's been abducted by aliens, and he says, superhero, you got to help. I've been abducted by aliens. They put me on a table and they probed me and they prodded me and they did all sorts of humiliating things. And the superhero says, the same thing happened to me today, but it wasn't my gastroenterologist. And when I thought of that, I was laughing for a very long time because I was thinking of jokes and I was thinking, like I go through things, I go through symptoms, I go through tests that we do and treatments that we do. And I was thinking about being, laid flat on a table and you get prodded and probed, and I thought, oh, that sounds like how people describe alien abductions. And so that's where I came up with that joke, that it's like, we go into the gastroenterologist and we're laid flat on a table and we're drugged and probed, and it's exactly how people describe these abductions. So I couldn't help finding that hilarious. Because it's what we all go through. We've all gone through some weird tests and weird treatments. So I think that's very relatable. And the one that is my favorite that I just think is sweet is pretty much at the end of the book, which is the one where he's in a wheelchair chasing a butterfly and his girlfriend's pushing him. And I just think that's a really sweet one. So that's kind of my favorite on a sentimental level, because I think that's a really sweet kind of, when I made it, I was like, well, it's not really a joke, but it's like, it's just sweet. So I loved it.
Yeah, yeah, that image is just makes you smile, I think.
Yeah, I think it's really sweet. And I mean, it is a joke, I guess. It's unexpected. But yeah, I guess I like the heart behind it.
Yeah, definitely. Um, so you mentioned that you are still writing, still drawing new cartoons.
Hmm.
Is this something that might become a book too at some point?
Uh, yes, I haven't said anything yet, but might as well since you asked. Um, yeah, I was. I was never going to do a second one. I thought I would do this and then move on to something else because I do a lot of other things on my page. And I thought I have been a writer before, and I've been kind of writing blogs as well, bit by bit. So again, it's been something that I've been writing blogs on chronic illness for about 7 years. And I'm like, similar to Chronic Fatigue Superhero, I can just put this stuff together and there's a book. Even though I didn't sit down to write a book, it's like I have enough to make a book on this. So that was kind of what I was going for next, which I'll still do. But I just found myself getting more ideas after I made the book, and there was some old ideas that I sort of reworked, and I was going to just add them to the book. I was going to be like, oh, I'll just make like a deluxe edition or something like that later on. But I've ended up having so many that there is pretty much almost enough for another one already. So yeah, so there's a bit more work to be done on it, probably a few more months, but so I think I will release two, and it'll be the two books together, and then I'll move on to some of my more like wordy kind of books, I guess.
Oh, that's so exciting to hear.
And also, I think I was worried, like, it's like I've always been a fan of movies, and sequels. Sometimes they're not very good, and being a writer, I was always a bit concerned, especially a comedian. Like, I feel like most sitcoms, they go on too long and they run out of steam long before they finish. And it's very rare that a sitcom is like good all the way through, or particularly comedy, or sometimes there'll be like a funny first movie and then they'll make the second one and it just won't be that good. So I've always been a bit like, do I want to make a sequel? Because if I did, it probably couldn't be as funny. And so I really just didn't want to do a second one. But making these next lot, they are just as good. And I would not release it if it wasn't just as good, because that was my number one fear, was like, I don't want to do a second one because second books, second movies with comedy can be really hit and miss. But there's so much more like inspiration that I've had since releasing the book and going, oh, I missed that. I missed that symptom. I missed that test, or I missed that situation. And so when I put it together, I was like, actually, this is too good to be just pasted onto the first book. This is actually good enough for a second one. So that's pretty exciting.
Yeah, I mean, it's the gift that keeps on giving, isn't it? There's always another symptom, there's always another test.
Yeah, exactly. There's always something.
Well, thank you so much for joining me today. It's been such a pleasure speaking with you and hearing a bit more about the sort of inspiration behind the superhero. So I will make sure I drop a link to the book into the show notes for anyone who hasn't already read it. I can highly recommend it. And yeah, thank you so much for your time.
So much for having me, Jackie. It's been really nice.
Thank you so much to all of my guests, and to you for listening. I hope you've enjoyed it, or at least found it useful. The Long COVID podcast is entirely self-produced and self-funded. I'm doing all of this myself. If you're able to, please go to buymeacoffee.com/LongCovidPod to help me cover the costs of hosting the podcast. Please look out for the next episode of the Long COVID podcast. It's available on all the usual podcast hosting things. And do get in touch. I'd love